This video is part of a series. To better understand it, I highly recommend watching the series in order. I hope you enjoy it. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you. Most everyone is familiar with Our Lady of Fatima. It is one of the most widely recognized apparitions of our time. But do you know everything? Come, let's explore this apparition together. I think you'll truly be surprised at what you discover. Our Lady appeared to 3 shepherd children in Fatima, Portugal, Lucia Santos and her 2 cousins, Jacinta and Francisco Marto. Before the first apparition of Our Lady, the children were visited 3 times by an angel, thus preparing them for their meeting with the Blessed Mother. According to Sister Lucia in her memoirs, quote, "The angel said, 'Do not be afraid. I am the angel of peace. Pray with me.' He knelt, bending his forehead to the ground. With a supernatural impulse, we did the same, repeating the words we heard him say. 'My God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love thee. I ask pardon for those who do not believe, do not adore, do not hope, and do not love thee.' After repeating this prayer 3 times, the angel rose and said to us, 'Pray in this way. The hearts of Jesus and Mary are ready to listen to you.'" End quote. In the last 2 visits, the angel revealed that he was the angel of Portugal and asked the children to offer prayers and sacrifices to God the Most High for the reparation for the sins by which he was offended and in supplication for sinners. The first and second secrets of Fatima. On the afternoon of May 13, 1917, the 3 children saw 2 flashes of lightning, then a lady by the holm oak tree. A lady dressed in white. They described her as shining brighter than the sun, giving out rays of clear and intense light, just like crystal goblets full of pure water when the fiery sun passes through it. Quote, "We were so near," they said, "that we were in the light that encircled her, or which she radiated, perhaps 1.5 meters away. The lady wore a pure white mantle down to her feet, trimmed with gold. The rosary beads in her hands shone like stars, with its crucifix the most radiant gem of them all. She addressed the children, telling them not to be afraid, that she comes from heaven. She asked them to return to that spot on the 13th of each month for 6 months. She told the children to pray the rosary every day to bring peace to the world and an end to the war, which was World War I. Now the children experienced ridicule, insults, and torture. During that time, the government in Portugal was being run by Masons. Arthur Santos, who was mayor of Vila Nova de Ouro, was a member of the Masonic Lodge of Leiria. He also founded a new lodge in the same town he presided over. Lodges in neighboring towns joined with the lodge in Vila Nova because they opposed the apparitions. They proceeded to attack the shrines at the site with axes. Now, according to the local newspaper at that time, the men cut down the tree where the apparitions took place. They removed lanterns, 2 crosses, and they also performed blasphemous rituals on the site. But, unbeknownst to them, they chopped down the wrong tree. Sister Lucia would express relief on this matter. In the book, Fatima, A Message More Urgent Than Ever, they describe the government that was springing up in Europe at the time. Quote, "In the name of science and progress, a wave of anti-clericalism was sweeping Europe, a science and a progress whose immediate fruits had the formidable cannons that were slaughtering the youth and destroying the beautiful cities of the old continent. On February 1st, 1908, the King of Portugal, Dom Carlos, and the heir prince, Dom Louis Philippe, were assassinated. The king's second son ascended to the throne with the title Dom Manuel II, but was overthrown in 1910 by a revolution that established a French-style atheist, anti-clerical, and socialist republic. Religious orders were expelled, the clergy was persecuted, and wearing religious garb or ringing church bells was forbidden. The Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon was exiled. All over the country, but particularly in smaller cities, all one had to do to land a public job was to declare oneself anti-Catholic. End quote. The government tried their best to keep this growing apparition quiet, going to the point of imprisoning the children and, yes, even threatening to boil them alive if they did not recant their story. But they stood firm and refused. What strength and bravery those children had. They continued to go to the oak tree as they promised the Blessed Mother. She revealed 3 secrets to them of the future of the world and of the church. In the first secret, they were shown hell. Lucia recalls, quote, "Our Lady opened her hands as she had done before. The ray of light seemed to penetrate the earth, and we saw, as it were, a sea of fire. Plunged in the fire were demons and souls in human form, like transparent burning embers, all blackened or burnished bronze, floating about in the conflagration, now raised in the air by the flames that issued from within themselves, together with the great clouds of smoke, now falling back on every side like sparks in huge fires without weight or equilibrium. Amid shrieks and groans of pain and despair, which horrified us and made us tremble with fear. The demons could be distinguished by their terrifying and repellent likeness to frightful and unknown animals, black and transparent like burning coals. Terrified as if to plead with succor, we looked up at Our Lady, who said so kindly and sadly, 'You have seen hell, where the souls of poor sinners go. It is to save them that God wishes to establish in the world a devotion to my Immaculate Heart. If you do what I tell you, many souls will be saved and there will be peace. This war will end. But if man does not refrain from offending God, another and more terrible war will begin during the pontificate of Pius XI.' Now let me pause here. Pope Pius was not Pope then. He will not reign for another 5 years, and Our Lady specifically mentioned him in this message. We continue. 'When you see a night that is lit by a strange light, you will know it is a sign God gives you that he is about to punish the world with war, hunger, persecution of the Church and the Holy Father. To prevent this, I shall come to the world and ask that Russia be consecrated to my Immaculate Heart, and I shall ask that on the first 5 Saturdays of every month, communion of reparation be made in atonement for the sins of the world. If my wishes are fulfilled, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If not, then Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, bringing new wars and the persecution of the Church. The good will be martyred and the Holy Father will have much to suffer. Certain nations will be annihilated. But in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me and she will be converted, and the whole world will enjoy a period of peace. In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved." End quote. In the secret, Our Lady mentions a night lit by an unknown light. On the night of January 25, 1938, a phenomenon appeared in the sky, which was seen all throughout Europe, such as England, France, Spain, Portugal, and even as far as Bermuda. All transatlantic radio communications were interrupted, and fire stations were empty because people thought towns and cities were on fire. Even as far as Canada, communication services were disrupted. Several newspapers reported the phenomenon at that time, with people reporting the fear and awe that they felt. Both Sister Lucia and Pope Pius witnessed this event in their respective countries. Sister Lucia immediately wrote to the Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon. She said, quote, "War is imminent. The sins of men will be washed in their own blood. Those nations will suffer most in the war which try to destroy the kingdom of God. Portugal will suffer some of the circumstances of war, but because of our country's consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, she will not suffer them all." End quote. Now, 47 days after this phenomenon occurred, Adolf Hitler will invade Austria. The miracle of the sun. Because of all the torture that those children went through, they begged our mother to perform a miracle so that all who may see will believe. She promised them that during the last apparition she will. Now, for all of you skeptics out there who choose to still mock Our Lady and her messages, the miracle of the sun is an actual recorded event in history. It was witnessed by almost 70,000 people at the site of the apparition, and close to 100,000 people total, as it was also witnessed by people in neighboring towns as well as men out in the seas. The media, who is also owned by the Masonic government, and they tried to indicate that this was a collective illusion witnessed by those people. They were quickly debunked, as no two people can have the same illusion, let alone 100,000. Now, this is something to keep in mind for the future. As indicated by several prophecies, there will be another miracle that will occur where they will try to say it is a collective illusion. But even though they try to reason this miracle away, many people who witnessed this occurrence, including atheists, converted, repented, and declared the reality and salvation of the living God. But hey, don't take my word for it. I urge you to do your own research. In 1918, Francisco and Jacinta would go to be with our Lord, which was also revealed to them by the Blessed Mother during her visits. Lucia would later join the convent and live until the age of 97. She died in 2005. Many people do not know, but the apparitions and messages to Lucia and Jacinta continued beyond 1917. On June 13, 1929, Sister Lucia would be given her final message. In her words, she recalls the vision. Quote, "Suddenly a supernatural light illumined the whole chapel, and on the altar appeared a cross of light which reached to the ceiling. In a brighter part could be seen on the upper part of the cross the face of a man and his body to the waist. On his breast was an equally luminous dove, and nailed to the cross the body of another man. A little below the waist, suspended in midair, was to be seen a chalice and a large host, onto which fell some drops of blood from the face of the crucified and from a wound in his breast. These drops ran down over the host and fell into the chalice. Under the right arm of the cross was Our Lady with her Immaculate Heart in her hand. It was Our Lady of Fatima with her Immaculate Heart, in her left hand without a sword or roses, but with a crown of thorns and flames. Under the left arm of the cross, some big letters, as it were of crystal clear water running down over the altar, formed these words, "Grace and Mercy." I understood that it was the mystery of the Most Holy Trinity that was shown to me. Then Our Lady said to me, "The moment has come when God asked the Holy Father to make, in union with all the bishops of the world, the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart, promising to save it by this means. So numerous are the souls which the justice of God condemns for sins committed against me, that I come to ask for reparation. Sacrifice yourself for this intention and pray." End quote. In her memoirs, recounted by Frere Michel, Sister Lucia states that later, by means of an interior communication, our Lord said to her, quote, "They did not want to heed my request. Like the King of France, they will repent and do it, but it will be late. Russia will have already spread its errors throughout the world, provoking wars and persecutions against the Church. The Holy Father will have much to suffer." End quote. In Return to Fatima.org, they describe this last message and the means by which we arrive at it. Quote, "This mystical vision, so rich in its sacred imagery, was given for two reasons. Firstly, to warn the Pope and hierarchy of that time, who nevertheless refused to heed it. And secondly, to assist the faithful of our time. For at this time the second beast is perilously close to achieving the goal of the first beast, which is to eliminate the holy sacrifice of the Mass." End quote. Now we will discuss Vatican II and their role they played to help establish the false church that Our Lady warned about. But let us discuss the urgent need to consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart. She spoke of Russia spreading her errors throughout the world. Our Lady was warning of a very clear, devised plan to destroy the Church from within and have complete control over nations. See, that very same year, in November of 1917, exactly a month after the apparitions of Fatima finished, communist revolutionaries seized power in Russia. It was led by Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky. Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate his seat and was arrested and killed along with his wife and children. Now it would later be known that Lenin, Stalin, and Karl Marx, who wrote the Communist Manifesto and where the phrase Marxism originated, were avid members of Freemasonry. The persecution of Christians and the rebuke of God would begin in Russia. Lenin would declare that there was no God, there was just a state. He said, quote, "It is the power and authority of government now that would exceed God in your lives." End quote. They would proceed to destroy churches, break artifacts, and kill many religious leaders and civilians. This is what Our Lady meant when she called for the consecration of Russia in 1917 and again in 1929. Russia would indeed spread their errors of communism and atheism throughout the world. China would later become communist in 1949, Cuba in 1961, and by the early 80s, 1/3 of the world would live under communist rule. On March 19, 1937, Pope Pius XI released an encyclical, Divini Redemptoris. He stresses on the satanic character of communism and its plans to destroy the Church. In it, he states, quote, "We wish to expose once more, in a brief synthesis, the principles of atheistic communism, as they are manifested chiefly in Bolshevism. We wish also to indicate its method of action, and to contrast with its false principles the clear doctrine of the Church, in order to inculcate anew, and with greater insistence, the means by which the Christian civilization, the true civitas humana, can be saved from the satanic scourge, and not merely saved, but better developed for the well-being of human society." He continues, "Such venerable brethren, in the new gospel, which Bolshevistic and atheistic communism offers the world as the glad tidings of deliverance and salvation, it is a system full of errors and sophisms. It is in opposition both to reason and to divine revelation. It subverts the social order, because it means the destruction of its foundations, because it ignores the true origin and purpose of the state, because it denies the rights, dignity, and liberty of human personality." End quote. According to Bella Dodd, former communist agent who would later convert and return to the church with the help of Archbishop Fulton Sheen, in 1953 she stated, "During the Spanish War, which took place from 1936 to 1939, the Communist Party was able to use some of the best talent of the country against the Catholic Church by repeating ancient appeals to prejudice and by insinuating that the Church was indifferent to the poor and was against those who only wanted to be free." End quote. Having lived as a communist agent in America, testifying before a committee of the House of Representatives, she also stated, quote, "In the late 1920s and 1930s, I personally put 1,100 men into the priesthood in order to weaken the Catholic Church from within. The idea was for these men to be ordained and progress to positions of influence and authority as monsignors and bishops. Right now, they are in the highest places where they are working to bring about change in order to weaken the Church's effectiveness against communism. These changes will be so drastic that you will not even recognize the Catholic Church. Of all the world's religions, the Catholic Church was the only one feared by the communists, for it was its only effective opponent. The whole idea was to destroy not the institution of the Church, but rather the faith of the people, and even use the institution of the Church, if possible, to destroy the faith through the promotion of a pseudo-religion, something that resembled a Catholicism, but was not the real thing. Once the faith was destroyed, there would be a guilt complex introduced into the Church, to label the Church of the past as being oppressive, authoritarian, full of prejudices, arrogant in claiming to be the sole possessor of truth and responsible for the divisions of religious bodies throughout the centuries. This would be necessary in order to shame church leaders into an openness to the world and to a more flexible attitude towards all religions and philosophies. The communists would then exploit this openness in order to undermine the Church." End quote. Wow. She also admitted that their goal, as we have seen in the Freemason Alta Vendita, was not only to destroy the Church, but also indoctrinate our children and change the American school system. Now take a look at this picture. It was taken outside of a school, which is close to my town. Maybe Bella Dodd was right. In 1947, American author, historian, and teacher William Thomas Walsh published a book, Our Lady of Fatima, after he had the privilege of interviewing Sister Lucia. Speaking with her about Our Lady's messages and the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart, Sister Lucia states, "What Our Lady wants is that the Pope and all the bishops in the world should consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart on one special day. If this is done, she will convert Russia and there will be peace. If it is not done, the errors of Russia will spread through every country in the world." Does this mean, Walsh then added, in your opinion, that every country without exception will be overcome by communism? Sister Lucia answered, yes. Now Walsh, unsure if Sister Lucia understood the question, asked again, adding, "And does that mean the United States of America too will become communist?" Where Sister Lucia responded one more time with yes. What is interesting is from 1961 to 1965, Our Lady appeared to 4 young girls in Garabandal, Spain, where they were given what seems to be the same message. In September of 1978, Mary Lowley, one of the seers, would be interviewed by Father Francis Benac. This is what she stated in the interview. She said, "In spite of continuing to see the Virgin, we saw a great multitude of people who were suffering intensely. The Blessed Virgin explained to us that this great tribulation, which was not even the chastisement, would come because the time would arrive when the Church would appear to be on the point of perishing. It would pass through a terrible trial. We asked the Virgin what this great trial was called, and she told us it was communism. Father Benak then asked, did the Blessed Virgin speak of communism? Mary Lowly said Our Lady spoke several times about communism. I don't remember how many times, but she said a time would come when it would seem that communism had mastered or engulfed the whole world. I think it was then that she told us the priests would have difficulty saying Mass and talking about God and divine things. Father Benak asked, did Our Lady ever speak of people being put to death? Mary Lowly replied, what Our Lady said was that priests would have to go into hiding, but I didn't see whether they were being killed or not. She didn't exactly say they would be killed, but I'm sure they would be martyred. Father Benak continued, your mother told me that one night you were upstairs with your father and that you cried and cried for 1 hour. Afterwards, your father said to her, I have just seen the most touching sight. Lowly was crying the whole time while saying, oh, it's going to be like that. People are going to suffer like that. Oh, make me suffer. Do you remember what you said at the time? Mary Lowly said it was all related to communism and what is going to happen in the church and to the people, because all these things are to have repercussions amongst the people. When the church suffers confusion, the people are going to suffer too. Some priests who are communists will create such confusion the people will not know right from wrong. The interview ends there. Wow. Now, being a just and merciful God, honestly, it would be impervious to think that he will not intervene on behalf of his church and his children. The seer spoke fondly of the warning or illumination of conscience, which we will speak of later on in the video. Mary Lowly explained that it will come when the world needs it the most. She said, quote, now listen closely here because it sounds very closely to Fatima. When Russia will unexpectedly and suddenly overrun and overwhelm a great part of the free world. God does not want this to happen. In any case, the warning will come when you will see that the Holy Mass cannot be celebrated freely anymore. Then it will be that the world will most need the intervention of God. End quote. In a stunning interview on January 17, 2020, Spanish Cardinal Antonio Canizares Lovera of Valencia, Spain, warned that his country is now on the verge of a communist revival. He says, quote, Marxist communism, which seemed destroyed with the fall of the Berlin Wall, has been reborn and is certain to govern Spain. The sense of democracy is substituted for the imposition of a single way of thinking and by authoritarianism and absolutism incompatible with democracy. With much pain, I have to tell you and warn you that I have perceived an attempt to make Spain stop being Spain. Now, we may have given a possible sign to look for. Albrecht Weber is a German author. He interviewed Conchita Gonzalez, one of the seers of Garabandal, on November 14, 1965. In the book, The Finger of God, he states that she said, quote, the Pope will go to Russia, to Moscow. As soon as he returns to the Vatican, hostilities will break out in different parts of Europe, end quote. It was also revealed to them that this would occur when communism would return. Conchita told the author in 1965 when everything would be set in motion. She says, quote, when communism comes again, everything will happen. The author responded, quote, what do you mean by comes again? She says, yes, when it newly comes again. He said, does that mean that communism will go away before that? Conchita replied, I don't know. The Blessed Virgin simply said, when communism comes again.